Hellos and welcome to this. Today I'm going to be analyzing a poem called The Garden of Love by William Blake. I've done this before, but it sucked. I just went back to it and I saw it and I was like, no. I should do it again because I don't think I made sense while explaining it, but I do hope that I do make sense explaining it this time. Yeah, so let's get to it. William Blake. William Blake was seen to be a very radical poet whose work influenced a lot of writers and musicians after his time, because while he was alive, he wasn't really recognized, and only once he passed away, he was recognized. And he was born in England in the year 1757, like ages ago, man. And he passed away in 1827. Still ages back. But his work is still relevant today, and his ideas are still relevant today, and still pertain to the ills of society and the way that things are. His work, he wrote a lot about the socio-political climate within his day, and yes, it is so relevant within today's society. Some things never do change. And let's get down to this poem called The Garden of Love. And he says, I went to the Garden of Love, and I saw what I never had seen. A chapel was built in the midst where I used to play on the green. And the gates of this chapel were shut, and thou shalt not tread over the door. So I turned to the Garden of Love that so many sweet flowers bore. And I saw it was filled with graves, and tombstones where flowers should be, and priests in black gowns were walking their rounds, and binding with briars my joys and desires. So we'll notice that it's this poem, the first two stanzas, they're written with the same rhyme scheme, A, B, C, B, D, E, F, E. And in a anaphoristic trimeter, and you'll notice the heavy stresses on the words as we go through the poem. And the last two lines is actually a tetrameter. I had to look it up, but yeah, the last two lines are a tetrameter. The meter of the lines change, the last two lines, but yeah. Okay, now going on to the first stanza, where he says, I went to the Garden of Love, and I saw what I never had seen. A chapel was built in the midst where I used to play on the green. So I, indicating the lyrical flow of the movement of the poem. Garden of Love, symbolic, and serves as a metaphor for what once used to be filled with beauty and a deep love. Like, if you think of the word love, it's just love. It's just a beautiful, on its own terms. It's something that cannot be described. That's how beautiful it is. And he, in this case, love, the love he is referring to is like mutual, pure oneness love. And also the Garden of Love reflects the Garden of Eden. If you if you're studying this in very, relating it to biblical reference, then yes, Garden of Love reflects the Garden of Eden, and we'll see the ideas of it while we progress through the poem. And I saw what I never had seen, a chapel. A chapel is a church, and it was built in the midst, where I used to play on the green. I used to play, indicating that he was a child, and he used to play on the green, the grass, also symbolic, the color, to nature, growth, and fertility. And now he comes to this chapel, he comes to the garden, and he sees a chapel built in the middle of the garden. And the garden once, used to serve as happy memories for him. He used to play in this garden. It was filled with beautiful memories for him. And the chapel, we'll see, signifies into institutionalized religion, where belief systems are arranged, where they will tell you that this is right and that's not right, and if you don't do this, then you're a sinner and you don't belong here. And yes, he's just introducing us to these ideas in the first stanza, and you'll see in the second stanza as it progresses what happens. And yeah, going on to the second stanza, it says, and the gates of this chapel were shut. So he explains it further now what happened. The gates of this chapel were shut, and thou shalt not read over the door. So I turned to the garden of love that so many sweet flowers bore. And here he describes the church, the chapel. It had gates, and the gates were closed. And thou shalt not was written over the door. And thou shalt not refers to the 10 Commandments, which brings on this very sternness of the idea that the chapel represents. And you see the tension building up in the second stanza, where things getting more and more negative. This peaceful garden we see now, things are happening, something's changing within it, and it all has to do with this chapel being built. And you'll see that it kind of transformed the garden to be something like that of a prison, where the chapel stands there, and the chapel is bounded by gates which are shut. And it's a place where people are not free to act anymore because of the thou shalt not, of all the rules making them fear what they actually want to do, but now they're bounded by it. They're not free to act really. And then the poet turns back to the garden of love. He turns back, and this kind of, paints a picture of him turning back and thinking about what it once used to be. It's now just a memory. The garden of love that he so once knew that was beautiful is now turned to be something that he could never get back, because it has just become a memory, because now everything's changed. And you see sweet connotating to the garden of love, that what once was beautiful is now not. And then we go to the last stanza, where he says, and I saw it was filled with graves and tombstones where flowers should be, and priests in black gowns were walking their rounds and binding with briars my joys and desires. And we'll see, like in the whole poem that Blake wrote, the language is quite straightforward. It's lyrical, it's like straightforward, like there's nothing really puzzling about it. It's like just there. And then he says, and I saw it as full with graves. So going back to the present moment where he's currently observing this garden. And he actually, yes, describes it to be a present further, because it's a place where people are not free to act. It's bounded by gates, and we see it is associated with the loss of life, with the word graves. and the priests wear uniforms. They are all in black, and they patrol these grounds, the garden, like warders, and they act without feeling towards freedom, and they binding freedom with briars. Where he says, binding with briars my joys and desires, and briars pertaining to a painful way of confining freedom. I just kind of read that his view of writing this was during his days, the church, it wasn't very pleasant, and he saw people getting poorer and poorer everywhere around him, and the church was just getting richer and richer, and it's kind of why even the most purest of things, or everything, you have to kind of analyze everything. I wanted to say something about the stanzas before we actually conclude this thing. That in the first stanza we find the trimeter. It's also found in the second stanza and in the beginning of the third stanza also, but in the last two lines of the third stanza, Blake uses a tetrameter. He said, making meaning that the lines are longer than the previous one, and also for emphasis of what he wants to put out there. He just like leaves it with a bang. Yeah, and that was a poem called The Garden of Love by William Blake. And I hope that I have made sense. I hope I am making sense. If you're so long within this video thing, yeah, I appreciate it and thank you. Also, I wanted to say, like, with this poem, we could have went like super deep, super deep, just making reference to it and looking at it, referring to the biblical sense of it, the Garden of Eden. Or we just could have looked at it literally or figuratively, symbolically. Like, I think we looked at it every way. I don't know. It all depends on the way that you see it. If you read any poem, it's not specifically, textbook or your teacher dictating it to you. It's the way that you see it, and the way you see it, it can never be, you can never be wrong, because it's your level of perception. It's the way you see things, and perception is everything. And yeah, thank you for watching this, and if you like it, and we'll see you soon. Hopefully I will kind of do some more of this, because I'm so cut out for time, but I do want to make this thing grow. Yeah, thank you and goodbye.